Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our special webinar tonight on handling Mother's Day. Honored to be with you tonight. My name is Alan Pedersen. I'm the Executive Director of the Compassionate Friends, and joining me tonight are Dr. Gloria Horsley and Dr. Heidi Horsley tonight as well as Dr. Janice Nadeau is our special guest tonight, and she's not only experienced great loss, but she's a professional. Welcome in, first of all, my dear friend, Dr. Gloria Horsley, and from Open to Hope, opentohope.com. You guys are tremendous. We are partners in all of these webinars. Welcome, Dr. Gloria. How are you doing this evening?
Hey, Alan, great. And what fun to have somebody on that we met at ADAC, Association of Death Educators. And what a fantastic person and what a great therapist. And I am so looking forward to hearing more about how we handle Mother's Day, because it can be a toughie.
Yeah, I am. I'm excited about that too. We met Janice Nadeau in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago, and we got talking with her. And like you said, not only is she worldwide known as a professional and a therapist, but she's also well known for her work in the field of death, dying, and in fact, in 1998, she had a book that came out called Families Making Sense of Death, which is still available through Sage Publishing. So she's a leader in that industry, also understands family dynamics. But what I really like about it is that she's also experienced a lot of loss in her life. In 2010, her husband died of Alzheimer's. Her daughter, Cindy Lee, died from an autoimmune disease. And then in 2015, her own mother died. So she's experienced a lot of loss in her life and worked professionally. And so we're just excited to have her tonight. So please welcome to our webinar tonight, Dr. Janice Nadeau. Janice, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's just wonderful to be with you, and such an honor to be a part of your organizations.
So you're dedicating this to your mom. I love that.
Yes. Yeah, my mother, who was a nurse, I put RN on there. She would like that. I'm surprised she didn't ask to have it on her gravestone. He was buried in her uniform, and it actually fit her. Which,
oh my gosh, I love it. She was buried in as a past nurse and still nurse. I love she was buried in it. She wore a hat. She was the day of the hats, wasn't she?
We tried to find one, but they looked a little silly at this stage of the game, and but we found her little gold RN pin, and she had that on for the funeral as well. She went to nursing school in Vermont, and that's where she met my dad, who broke his hip by a motorcycle accident, and she was the nurse in his ward, and as they say, the rest is history. One of the first things she had to do as a student nurse was she had to, because the orthopedic doc had put him in traction before they took off his jeans, she had to use her nurse's scissors and cut off his jeans, and you better believe we never let her forget that.
And by the way, I love the fact she's with her cat, because we're going to be seeing your dog later that you use for therapy, and oh, animals are so awesome. Look at her with that beautiful cat.
Yes. Well, I was struck when she died. You know, people talk about becoming an orphan, and I never really quite got that. And then the day after she died, I realized not only am I an orphan now at the ripe old age of 76, I am also now the oldest member of my family, and I don't like that one single bit. I think you might like to know that cat, who is huge, his name is Itty Bit. This is Cindy Lee Nadeau Weatherby, and she died in January of 2010. From an autoimmune disease that she had had for many, many years. She had her children before she died, and they were 4 and 6 and 8 when she became ill. And so what they know is mostly their mom not being well. This is a high school play. I think it was.
Now, did she live by you? Were you a lot involved with her?
Well, you know, they were in the military, and then about the time we moved from Vermont to Minnesota, they moved out here with us as well and left the military. So, fortunately, I really had a lot of time with her and with her kids. before she died. And I have to say to the moms who were listening, I've looked at this picture many, many, many times. And when I was looking at it the other day, I noticed her foot, her right foot that she has touched on the floor, and her high arch. And all of a sudden I realized that that's like her father's foot. And I just started weeping. It just surprised me. I never had really noticed that. And my husband had very high arches, and I started feeling really, really sad as I was doing this presentation. And I stood up to try to see if I could gather myself and walked into my kitchen. And here were all the walls and the ceiling were covered with rainbows. And it's from I have a cross, a crystal cross on the windowsill, and it was so perfect. I felt so awful. And then here were these wonderful rainbow symbols all over the kitchen, and I just stepped right into the middle of them. And
I love it, but I also love the fact that she's stepping out. She's stepping into heaven, maybe. But I have a question here for you. It says, this will be my second Mother's Day since my only son died. My mom died a year prior to his death. Wow, we're so sorry about that. I'm doing well in many ways, but when I think about this coming Sunday, I feel my anxiety rising. I'm planning to go hiking, which my son and I like to do, but I don't want to be with anyone. So many reminders. Any other activities that you can think of?
You know, I often tell people that that it's best if we can participate in whatever we can, so we don't get too isolated. That's not a good thing. But to stay on the edges or on the fringes of whatever it is you do, so that you can leave, so you feel to get out of wherever you are at a moment's notice. And there's just something about having the car keys in your hand, or being on the edge of the crowd, or being at the edge of the, you know, if you're in a public place by the door, or on the edge of a group of people, if they're in an audience of some kind, it just gives you a little bit more of a feeling of I can walk or run if I need to. And that does seem to allow people to hang in there a little longer, you know? So absolutely. I think it's wonderful that she's going to get some exercise. That's a good idea. I wanted to just kind of talk about layers of loss. And for older mothers, I don't know what older means anymore. It seems to me that every year I get older. Older is much older. Not my age, of course. But I was thinking about all the layers of the losses that older mothers have. In my case, it's the loss of my own mother. I realized that as I walked past the Mother's Day cards at the supermarket, that this will be the first year that there is no mother's card to choose or to send to her. And that was pretty sad. I wasn't totally prepared for what that might feel like. And as with many reminders of our losses, it just struck me kind of blindsided a bit that, oh my goodness, that's right, Mother's Day is coming and I won't be sending a card this year. So that's one layer. And then, of course, another layer is the loss of my daughter. I won't be receiving a Mother's Day card from her. You look for those, you know, and she was always good at putting some smart aleck remark in the card. She had a good sense of humor, which carried her very nicely. So that's level 2. And then I watch my grandchildren, her children. My own children, of course, have lost their sister.
Right. Oh, Heidi, I'm glad she said that. I know you're a big sibling loss person.
That's right. Well, you all know just what that's like, and how much of a different kind of a loss it is to lose a sister or a brother.
Absolutely. So Cindy has some siblings, you said, right?
Yes.
You have other kids.
Yeah. Cindy has a sister, Lori, and 2 brothers, Mark and.
And where is Cindy in the birth order?
Cindy was the oldest.
She was the oldest. Yeah, it's so difficult to lose your sibling, as you know, because I mean we come into this world and we kind of take this journey with our siblings. They're part of our past. They're part of our present. We expect them to be part of our future. We don't expect to have to bury our siblings until we're 90 years old.
You shouldn't have to. You know?
Yeah.
But that's how it is, and they talk about her a lot, and she was especially close to my youngest, who's 10 years younger than she is, and she kind of mothered him. And whenever I see pictures of the youngest one and the oldest one, he's always trying to act like a baby, you know, like somehow he could maybe just sit on her lap or something.
Well, and I think you were just saying that your kids talk about Cindy, and I think that is going to be so important to Cindy's children, because they will have stories about Cindy growing up, and they'll be able to keep her memory alive for her kids. Because her kids, I don't know how old they are right now, but it sounds like they only knew Cindy as being sick, right? You said, and so they can have all these wonderful stories that they can share. I think part of our job as siblings is to keep our brothers and sisters' memories alive.
And you know, those stories, as you know very well, the sibling stories are very different than the ones parents would tell, right?
Exactly. We know stuff about our brothers and sisters that our parents don't know.
So then you're talking about grandchildren losing their mother too, right?
Yes, and they're, you know, every year they talk about her more, which is interesting to me. They were very well aware that when they're talking to Grandma, they're talking about the mother who lost her daughter. So they've been a little careful with me, I think, and maybe I've been a little more careful with them. But just watching them and their grief, you know, here's Mother's Day, and they're sweet with me, but I'm still Grandma, I'm not Mom. And we hurt. It's amazing to me, you know, I couldn't help but think about how we talk about vicarious trauma and how people who watch others being hurt or tortured or whatever, how it is as if it's happening to them. And so I think there might be a little something in here, watching the grandkids missing their mom, that is kind of, it's vicarious pain. And I don't know if that fits.
And Janice, I think one of the hard things about losing your mother is you've never known your world without your mother.
That's right.
She's always been in your life, and it's like, who am I without my mom? What does my life look like? I mean, it's totally new territory. I just think of my own mom losing your mom. I mean, you never knew life without her.
That's right. That's right. And you're a kid as long as there's a mom who's alive, no matter how well they are even.
Exactly. And I think of my own mom. Mom, I think of you saying, you know, I would have, you know, you always go to your mom for advice no matter how old you are. And then you start going to her for parenting advice as you get older.
Right. And now I want some old age advice, and she's gone.
Exactly. So you can't ask her for advice anymore, or go to her for support, or, you know, go to make her proud or whatever.
Yeah.
That's right. I took my sweetheart home to meet my mom just in time when she still was able to appreciate that he was with me. And at the end I said, well, so Mom, do you like him? Do you like him? And she said, well, it doesn't matter if I like him, as long as you like him. Then she put the spectacles down and she looked at me, you know, and she said, you wouldn't move in with him, would you? And I don't even remember what I said, and I'm just thinking to myself, wait till I tell my girlfriends that I got advice from my 98-year-old mom when I was 76. That's just lovely. So
that's good. That's sweet. So getting down to nephews and nieces, you know, I just feel like we've got kind of a pie here. I mean, a Mother's Day pie almost. You don't even think about all those layers.
And even when I was teaching at ADEC a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that's when my sister-in-law died that noon while I was teaching.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking about my nieces and nephews in Vermont, and she had children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and this will be their very first Mother's Day, and she will not have been gone even a month when Mother's Day comes. So pretty rough on them. It's going to be tough.
You know, Janice, the thing that I like about giving this information to people, you know, especially people who are new in their grief, and like you say for yourself, you can know all that you know about grief, but experiencing it for the first time is something else. But I think what's important is for people to understand that some of that anxiety about Mother's Day or whatever the holiday is, or the special occasion, is that grief can be coming from so many different places, and it can come from these different layers. And sometimes we could rationally say, well, you know, Mom was old or whatever, you know, and I'm glad this person doesn't suffer or whatever, but then we hurt because we see other people hurting. So I think it's important to understand any special days that there are these different layers and that the grief can be coming from all of those places, and to be aware of that.
Well, I'm also thinking, Alan, I mean, if you've lost a child, which I know a lot of our listeners have, I mean, I think this has got to be one of the hardest days of the year. Because, you know, this is a day to celebrate being a mom, being a mother, and your child is the one that that's thanking you and celebrating that with you, and not to have that child there. And I think we've always said the days leading up to the event, which are right now, those days leading up to Mother's Day are going to be very anxiety provoking for a lot of people.
You know, one thing about it also is for our biggest search on our website of over 1 million people is for parent loss, and these are adults who've lost a parent, so Mother's Day is a tough time for them. I'm going to give you another question. My little girl died 2 years ago on May 8th, 2014. I realize that every so many years her Angel Day will fall on Mother's Day, and I am struggling with how to cope. Brianna is my firstborn, and she is how I became a mother in the first place. And I want to celebrate and honor that, but I'm deeply, deeply grieving as I relive her last weeks of life, which are marked by terrible medical complications. One of the things I found is the days leading up to it can be worse than the day. So hang in for that. But anyway, do you have a response to that for her?
Well, I want to just underscore what you just said, Gloria, because I have for years, and I'm not even sure what the research shows about it. I'm not familiar with this kind of research, but I found that the 2 weeks before, and I just say, this may not be true for you, but it seems to be true for many, that those 2 weeks before, even if you're not consciously remembering, which I'm certainly Brianna's mother will be, the body remembers, and that those 2 weeks can be pretty rough, and people are uneasy, they're restless, and they don't know for sure what it is, and it just is so common, and so many have come back and said, I'm so glad you warned me, because I was all fretting about that. The day itself wasn't as bad as I thought, but those 2 weeks leading up were awful.
Someone says, how do we focus on our thoughts on something positive instead of the pain in my heart? Thank you. And I think we're going to get to that in a couple of slides, right?
Well, I'm not a poet, but I've had a couple poems come to me in the last few years, I guess probably right out of the depths of the pain. But this would have been just a few months after my husband died. And he had died in December, and this is May, so not far from this time of the year, actually. And I had read a little daily devotion on pockets and patches, and so that's what triggered this. And it goes like this. In this lonely time of sadness, I search for pockets of hope and patches of gladness. I find them in people I barely know, in the dentist who pulled my tooth, in the audiologist who helped me hear, in the agent who sold me nursing home care. Perhaps someday there will be more than pockets and patches. There will be pools of hope and ponds of gladness. But right now, search as I may, it's pockets and patches for another day. And what I would say about that is that I could say that more and more for me, it's pools of hope and ponds of gladness, way beyond the patches and pockets that I experienced early on. And while we know there's really no such thing as stages of grief, as time goes by and we find ways to cope and to carry the burden of loss, things can let up. And that's awfully hard to believe in the beginning, and especially when we have those images that Brianna's mom is talking about of the bad times at the end. Those are hard to get over. But with some time, we do go back to the better memories, it seems, the early on memories before someone was sick. So I would say, hold in there. Help consists of going inside and going outside. I think here's the key. Find what works for you. The other day it was the rainbows in the kitchen.
I love that. Wonderful.
Yeah, it felt good. It felt really good. And I found that for many of us, and I like it that Ken mentioned that Alan mentioned did I say that right?
Yeah, it's Ellen, right.
That he
Yep.
learned about the whole idea of the anxiety that's attached to it all. And if people don't already know how to meditate, it's not usually an easy time to learn how during early grief. And I found that for myself and also for some of my clients, if they use guided imagery, and I'm particularly fond of Belarus Naperstek, because guided imagery, you don't have to dream it up yourself. You follow what the leader is saying, and it lends itself better than all the concentrating that you have to do to learn to meditate.
Because you're right. You know, the monkey mind, after you've had a loss, your mind is just going berserk.
Prayer is meaningful for a lot of people. I find that some people don't have the words for prayer, and I remember years and years ago I worked with a woman she had just had a new baby and discovered that she had breast cancer while she was pregnant. And I remember that she wasn't able to pray. She didn't have a particular faith system, and I had made that suggestion that she just kneel and do deep breathing and forget the words, just the deep, deep breathing in a prayerful mode. Never mind the doctrine, never mind all the rest of it. Just do something simple and think about breath as spirit. And that's so uncomplicated. And she seemed to, I was awake all night after I talked to her, but she went home and did what I'd suggested and went to sleep. So what's that? But that's what happened. All kinds of body work. Therapeutic touch is something that nurses have been doing for many years. Massage, Reiki healing. People, depending on where people live, there are a variety of these kinds of services because being touched is so comforting, or can be. And I think if there's ever a time to splurge on some of these things, it would be a time of grief.
Well, Janice, I think you're making a good point because, I mean, when you lose somebody like, you know, your parent or your child or your sibling, you do lose a lot of times you don't have enough touch. You're touch deprived because your children were on your lap and they were hugging you and you were holding them, and, you know, moms hug you and, you know, you're hugging mom, etc. And so I'm just thinking about Mother's Day. I mean, oftentimes you are touch deprived, and massage will give you a lot back. It will give you some of that touch back into your body, and it is really important.
Well, I was also thinking to ask for a bunch of hugs on Mother's Day, too.
20 seconds of hugs will change the way that you feel. And my mom and I have done a lot of stuff on this, and you can even hug yourself. If you hug yourself, you will get the same benefits as if somebody else hugged you.
Right now and give yourself a hug and rock.
Give yourself a hug, Alan. Alan, come on.
I'm hugging myself right now. I'm in a big hug. I'm feeling better. I think I'm going to make it through Mother's Day now. I do.
Alan's loving on himself.
Is he? Well,
I love it.
A good picture. He smiles so nicely. He's probably doing that right now.
Exactly, Janice. And it will change the way that we feel. For those of you hugging out there, I know that you're feeling different right now.
Yeah.
And so like you said, Janice, breath is also very important because we breathe very shallow when we are grieving. So just putting your feet on the ground and taking a couple of really deep breaths very slowly in and out will shift your energy in a positive direction.
You know what I love about that is we have known that for many, many years, and we've been using it in healthcare for many years, especially the nurses. But what I like is that now we have these wonderful brain scans, these functional MRIs, so we can actually see how the brain changes when we do these things.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Isn't it amazing? When what we put comes together with a little scientific documentation, it's really fun. Really fun.
Right, exactly.
Now, walking is very, very important. And I tell people not to do terribly vigorous exercise, although folks who are already on a program probably need to be vigorous in order to kind of get the release. But if people are just really weak and have no energy, just plain easy walking will do a lot for us to blow off some of the tension, work off some of the tension. And it seems that the area that's stimulated when we walk and the area where we do some of our best thinking are very close to each other in the brain. And so if you can picture that as you're walking, that can be helpful.
And Janice, walking 20 minutes a day will decrease your risk of stroke by 50%. And a lot of people at Compassionate Friends right now, Alan knows this because his wife is one of them, have Fitbits. You go out and buy a Fitbit, you put it on your wrist, and you can see how many steps you take every day. Right now, as we're speaking, I'm walking around with the phone in my hand because I want to get up to 10,000 steps because that's how many we're supposed to take a day. And it's really fun to have them on. You can just walk around your apartment or your house. You don't have to, go run a marathon.
That's right. Well, we've got Ken hugging himself, and we've got Heidi walking around. So,
that's right.
Now, Gloria, how are you managing?
I don't know. I played some golf right before this with my hubby.
There you go. There you go.
And the other thing, I want to say one more thing about the exercise because I think it is so key. You said something about yoga. You do not have to be a yogi to do yoga. Restorative yoga is so relaxing, and you do not have to be flexible, and you never have had to take a class. You go in, and they lay you down in different positions, and you actually feel like you're just resting. And it really changes your energy, and it changes the way that you feel, and it makes you sleep better that night. It's amazing, the benefits.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. It makes me think back to those early studies that they did with rats, where they would stress a rat when it's all by itself and measure all the stress hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would put a second rat in the cage or wherever that first rat was, and they would do the same amount of stress, and with another rat present, this is not even a friendly rat. It's not a relative or anything like that. It's just another rat. And when they measured the stress hormones of the first rat, there was far much less stress hormones secreted when there was just another rat in their cage. Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot to be said about being around others. And I think when you go to yoga, if you go to a class, you've got a room full of people all trying to relax and kind of breathe right. And it's a little bit contagious, it seems.
We have another question here. It's a lady who says, I lost my husband. Then this will be my first Mother's Day without him with the family. I'm kind of dreading going to Mother's Day. I wonder if I should skip it. What do you think? I'm planning on going to my daughter's.
Pretty tough to know. Again, this person might not have been tuned in when we talked about that earlier, but just that idea of if you can go, even for a little bit, there's something to be said for just showing up just for a few minutes even, or even more importantly, trust your own sense of what you need and what's going to be healing and helpful for you. But if you can go, and limit the time you're there and keep yourself in a place where you can leave at a moment's notice. It helps people to relax and even to tell the hostess, I may not be able to stay, so if I leave, just let me leave. Don't try to stop me or ask me a lot of questions or soothe me. Just let me go.
I love that, telling people in advance.
This is what I'd also like to say to this person, and I'm sorry that you lost your spouse. I mean, that's really difficult. I do want to say, and we've done a lot of shows about things like this, about the holidays, if you want somebody to do a toast for your spouse, or if you want your spouse's name to be said, or if you want to just do a toast at dinner, or any kind of ritual, you might want to ask someone to do that, or you might want to do it yourself, or ask somebody, because what we found often, and what was my own experience with my brother, is when you go to people's homes during the holidays, it's very upsetting if no one says anything about someone that you've lost. And, no one brings up Scott, or no one brings up something, especially early on. And oftentimes when you do go to things and go to holidays, no one does say anything. So if you want some kind of recognition, you might have to tell somebody to do that for you, or you might need to tell people that you're going to do it.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say something else too, Heidi, which is, Heidi always says, I know this is, tough, but don't deny your kids the opportunity to celebrate you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Keep on mothering. Keep on mothering.
Let be mothered. Yeah.
You're right, because her daughter wants to honor her mother for being in her life, and she's not going to be able to do that if her mother doesn't show up.
Sidney Cobb was writing on social support, back before there were mountains. His work was very early on, and I've kind of stayed bonded to it, even though there's been a ton of work in social support since then. And I like these 3 simple ideas of what we all need, that everyone needs to be loved and cared for. This is not rocket science. But the point here is that to be loved and cared for is about the intimate relationships, the very, very closest relationships that we have, and that we all need those. And when we go to build social support and try to help clients who tend to isolate or who haven't done a lot of this with their lives, coaching them on just how to. And I think sometimes it's in these great times of loss that we learn that it's all right to lean on somebody. It's all right to be more vulnerable and more transparent. And sometimes relationships, intimate relationships, become deeper in times of great loss. Not always, and everyone is in stress. And I want to say there in that section, you know, we think about how family members, we theorize or we imagine that family will be there for us in a time of great loss. But the fact is, everyone in the family's lost someone too. And you can't fill up a cup from an empty pitcher. And so we need to be reaching outside of our families more for the help and support that we need. And that's just, I think, something that people are sometimes unprepared for. Well, of course, my family will be there for me. Well, what if they're all hurting as much as you are? How can they be? And it's simple, but it really is an important thing.
Okay, we've got another comment here. I lost my daughter to suicide 8 months ago. By the way, we are so sorry to hear about, you know, these sad things. I also found her. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I want to stay in bed and sleep the day away, go to work, have my mom over. I'm at a loss. And then under that, I think it's from the same person, she says, you just said not to deny my kids from honoring me. I guess I won't stay in bed all day. That's
I love that.
Yeah. It's hard to trust yourself to know what you really need when you're so needy.
Mm-hmm.
These are some sad things that we're hearing tonight, aren't they?
Yeah, it is tough. And here's another one. It says, my son died of a massive infection 3 years ago, and Mother's Day makes me feel that I should have been a better mother.
Mm.
No.
I think that everybody on this call can probably, Alan and Janice and Gloria, Mom, say that that's a very normal feeling. That's what I've always heard, that you feel like, okay, I should have, would have, could have.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's just that's just the parents feel no matter what. I don't know. What do you think? Alan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think as parents, you know, our job is to protect our children and to keep them safe, and whether or not it's rational that we could have, we feel like we should have. You know, my comment back to the one question leads to what Janet has up on the slide next about to be valued and esteemed. And I do, you know, when we get support, and we need support, Lord knows we do when we have these losses, I think that ties right into what Gloria said about, you know, not denying our kids celebrating their mom. Maybe on Mother's Day for that person, that just to be with family who values you as a mother, and, you know, and gives you some esteem, because we do lose our self-esteem a lot of times in loss for that. But it's just so difficult, and that's why I think for each of us, we all grieve different, and what's going to work for each of us is so unique that we just have to really go inside ourselves and figure out what we can do, and kind of trust our instincts, because our grief instincts are so different.
Mm-hmm. Alan, that's perfect what you just said. I just couldn't agree with you more. I think about when I do that mother piece with my daughter, the regret that I have, and the why didn't I see it piece is that I was so exhausted from taking care of my husband with his dementia that I didn't realize that my daughter was losing ground, and that she was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And one of my regrets and things that I've had to work with myself, because retrospectively now we think we could have done more than we really could have at the time. I think, you know, why wasn't I at Cindy's house more and not with Len so much? But I was so tied up with him and so kind of blinded to what was going on in the rest of my family at the time. I didn't even see it. I didn't realize it. And fortunately, I got there before she died, and I had about maybe the count of 3 before she finally passed. But I have many times had the thought, I wish, I was the mom. Where was I? I was home with the dad. So it's really hard to not think those thoughts. They're so normal, and I don't know anyone who hasn't had them.
Yeah, I would say that between us all on this call, we've probably dealt with thousands and thousands of people who've lost children, in my case, children, and it would be very rare the person who didn't have some form of guilt and regret, whether it even would be I didn't get to say goodbye. A lot of people struggle with that, so it is very common. And to that person that wrote in, I am so sorry for your loss, but very normal.
Yeah. And also for people who've been taking care of their mothers. Oh my gosh. We had somebody on our radio show recently who had taken care of her mother for years, and when her mother passed away, she felt like she hadn't done enough for her, and she didn't pick it up, and so yeah, we've got to say we did the best we could at the time, right, everybody?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's hard. We have to keep going back to that thought over and over again, and trusting that we really did, and then having another doubt, and then trusting it again.
I think being part of a community is really important, particularly if you're feeling really lonely this Mother's Day. Reach out for sure.
Yes, that's that last one there that's on this slide, that this idea of belonging to a community, and whatever that community might be. Sometimes it's churches, some neighborhoods, various groups and clubs and such. But the point about community, I think that's important, is that we're involved in that community, and that two things characterize it. One is that we know what we can expect from that community, and we also know what we're expected to give and how we're expected to contribute. It needs to be a two-way thing. Sometimes I have someone come to see me who doesn't belong to any community, and oftentimes their family's far away. And my metaphor for that is they're like bicycles on the freeway. That's how unprotected they are in the midst of the traffic of life. And it's hard to teach somebody when they're in the place of great pain and loneliness that they need friends and community. If it isn't already built, how do you build it in a time when you have so little reserve and so little resources?
Well, here's another statement I've got. Someone says, I used to go to church, but I'm feeling mad with God. That was what I did on Mother's Day. You got any thoughts about that?
Oh, I think God can handle it, frankly. That being mad at God is a very, very common response. I think a lot of people leave the church during a time of great loss because, for all kinds of reasons, sometimes blaming God for what happened or for not stopping it from happening. Sometimes it's because the church community itself is not responsive and not helpful. I've spent many years going to churches on Sunday mornings and giving lectures on how do you reach out to each other, what can you say or what do you not say. And I think churches is a place where you think there should be a lot of help and a lot of help, but a lot of help doesn't always come.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Appreciate it. I think the person needs to just be with it for a while. It's not wrong. It's common. I'm sure that, again, as Alan said before, if we added up all the people that we've heard say that very thing, I'm so angry at God, I think there'd be thousands and thousands, and it's just so normal.
Yeah, absolutely. But she's feeling mad with God. I would say, if you're denying yourself the social experience, you got to think about that, because maybe you need the support to go and give up that other thought. That somebody once said to me, it's the people that are religion anyway. It's not, they're the ones that are God is working through them. So let your friends be close to you. Here's another question or comment. It's from Evelyn. She says, and it's hard now in our grief doing the best for our kids who are still with us now. You feel like you aren't doing enough for them while you're still grieving the one who died, but we do the best we can, Evelyn.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good reminder. It's a good reminder.
I always say that too. This is Heidi, because a lot of the times I hear parents saying, we feel like we've not been good enough parents, and the reality is we see you, we know you're grieving, we know how painful it is for the whole family, and so we might not tell you this, but we're cutting you a lot of slack. We know that you're doing the best that you can given that you've lost your child. So I feel like all these siblings I work with are always saying to me, we get it. We understand that our parents are in a really bad place and having a really hard time. So try not to be as hard on yourself. I know it's hard as a parent, but our lives are really hard, and it's hard to lose a sibling, but it's not going to totally destroy our entire life. Your kids are going to end up having joyful times and finding hope again eventually.
It's harder if the kids are small and they don't really, they can't be expected to understand that. But I think that's the time to draw in those aunties and uncles and neighbor folks and borrowed grandmothers and grandfathers to help us with those children that need plenty of attention even when we've not got everything that we want to have to give them.
I like that idea, Janice, to bring people in, expand your system. Yeah.
Think about Mnuchin. Years ago, one of our old family therapists, and Gloria will remember this, Mnuchin would do work with the inner city families, some of the big Catholic families, and he would enlist the help of godparents. He would figure out godparents for every single child in those big families, and those godparents would make, they would make those kids feel special. And what a good idea.
I like that idea.
Reach out. Well, here's another comment from Lisa, and she says, I woulda, coulda, shoulda. Time really is a blow. I would have hugged and kissed and told her I loved her before I left. I accept that I did the best I could at the time. Someone just said that, and I tell her I love her every day as she sits on the mantel in a beautiful urn. Keep talking. So far, you guys got me out of bed for Sunday, Lisa.
Oh, Lisa, I'm so happy. We know how hard it is to get out of bed.
One thing about these webinars, and Janice, again, it's just such an honor to have you here tonight with us. But there's a common theme that runs through our webinars, whether it's on forgiveness or sibling loss or handling the holidays or tonight. It's just so important that when you're going through grief that you educate yourself about the process. And tonight what you talked about, the different layers that you experience in loss, but educating yourself about grief and then finding support, whatever that means to you individually. And I think that's why this slide is so important. I obviously I love the compassionate friends and open to hope, but one thing about the compassionate friends or families who've lost a child, a grandchild, or a sibling, we are that community. And, what can you expect when you go to the compassionate friends or reach out to us? You can expect someone who's going to listen to you and to let you tell your story, and who's going to, they may not know exactly how you feel, but we understand what you're going through. And what's expected of you is in turn, you're going to listen to somebody else's story, and we're going to be that support, and we're going to be that community that's with you long after the family and friends have gone back to life as normal. And so I love this slide. It's just great information that if people find that community, because you can't do this alone. Grief is lonely, but doing it alone is just makes it unbearable.
Well, and part of the thing about doing it alone, part of the issue with it is, and problem with it is that you don't know if what you're doing is normal. And sometimes you feel like I'm like this, I'm crazy, or I'm abnormal, or it's wrong to be mad at God and hate him right now. And and then you get around other people and you find that what you're going through is normal. 99% of what we do is normal. I mean, and I find even in my private practice that most people come to me as a psychologist in my private practice to see if what they're doing is normal. Right. And sometimes they think it's not normal because they don't have a support group. And when I tell them, hey, guess what it's called? It's called normal grief, what you're dealing with. They're so relieved.
I have an idea about normal that I like. I usually get a little bit of a chuckle. What we say about normal at my office is, the only thing we really know about normal is it's a setting on the dryer.
I like that. That's good.
Now this guy's name is Luther von Maxwell. And I say von Maxwell because I like to think that my first therapy dog, whose name was Captain Maxwell III, that he sent this one to take his place. And what he's got in his mouth there, I like to say, he's taking a little cigar break. That's a client's hand on him, and that's what he does in my office. Right there, he's looking at me in the camera. but he's got an elk horn that he likes to chew on, and that entertains him. But I really like to say he was working so hard that day, he was taking a little smoke break.
Ah, he looks like a Freudian dog. I love it.
So he yes, right. Some elk horns are just elk horns. And he really sits there and looks. He's got this wonderful way of giving eye contact. And it's a little spooky almost sometimes, because he just looks as if he's trying to see right through you and study you. And he cuddles up with people and puts his head on their feet if they get too manicky and jumpy. And it's just really, it changes the atmosphere here just in a beautiful way.
Well, Janice, you're bringing up two thoughts for me. One is that research shows that if you want to change the way that you feel, download pictures of cute animals on your cell phone. Yes. And look at them throughout the day when you're feeling like you're in a low place, because it'll change the way we feel. And also the power of pets. Yes. Having if you already have an animal in your life, just petting them and hugging them, and they give you a lot of love.
Yes. And once again, we have those wonderful brain scans, don't we, to show us just exactly how our brains change and how we light up and calm down when we have pets that we can touch. A lot of older people that I see here in this neighborhood where my office is, they're out here with their dogs early in the morning. It's their reason for getting up.
Exactly. When my brother died, a lot of people kind of would look at us and kind of avoid us in a way initially, because they didn't know what to say. And my mom went out and bought a dog, a little Lhasa Apso, and it brings people to you. They want to go and see the dog.
Some people do not love dogs. So, if you are one that doesn't love animals and you have family members that do, you can always, like my niece did, have them walk the neighbor's dog.
There you go.
So, Janice, you've got our next slide is a great picture of you and your mother. I absolutely love it on this Mother's Day. It is so sweet, and still giving you advice. I love it.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, that's right. And she went. I brought my husband. My daughter helped me bring my husband to Vermont one last time after he had had a stroke, and he wasn't well at all, and he was really very much not himself and pretty mean. He had a serious personality change, which so often comes. He had frontal temporal dementia, which is one we're learning more about. It's a young person's dementia. And I know that in the middle of something that he was doing, I don't ever remember being quite upset as I was that day. My mom took both my hands, and she was a woman. She's a Vermont farm wife and a woman of very few words, quiet nurse. And she took my hands and she just looked right at me and she said, "Just remember, Janice, things do not stay the same." And I have just rehearsed that in my head and been so grateful for that message, because it seemed to me, as sick as he was and my daughter having passed, that things were always going to be that bad and that difficult, and I was going to be that unhappy. And she was right. Things do not stay the same. Things shifted. Some things got better. Time went by. We did some healing. We did some learning. Not to suggest whatsoever that grief gets over. I think we have to be very careful that we get this idea that grief gets resolved or we recover or that there's an end to it, because I don't think as long as we live that we get completely over the losses we have. I like to think we get better at carrying them, not that we get over them. We get better at living with our losses. And to suggest that it passes so that it's not such a big deal, I think is a big mistake, and we need to be super careful not to ever give that message. So
I think it's important what you're saying, Janice, that it doesn't stay the same though, because I think that the pain for me was so incredibly intense the first 2 years that if I honestly believed that I would be in that level of intensity for the rest of my life, I don't know how I would have wanted to survive.
Right.
And although I'm never going to be over Scott. I don't want to be. I am the person I am today because he was in my life.
Right.
I'm over 30 years away from his death, and I don't have that pain anymore. I can get sad when I miss him on his birthday and on holidays, but for a little bit, but I recover very quickly. I have a lot of hope and joy in my life today. And I really want people out there that are early on in their grief, and some of you out there can't even get out of bed right now, to know that it does change. And we are here to tell you that you will have hope again, and you will do it in community just like you are tonight.
That's good, Heidi.
Yeah. I think that's the secret to it. I think that's what is really the whole juxtaposition with grief, is that we can be broken and miss and long for those we love who have died, but we can also grow and find joy and be whole in areas, in ways we never were. There is grief just offers the opportunity, and it's hard to see it when you're new. And if this is your first Mother's Day, I can't imagine that, I can see how this seems like a pipe dream, but coping with and walking through and adapting and finding new things in your life, there can be growth, and there can be good, and there is joy again, and there is hope for everybody. And I think the more we embrace the loss and understand we're going to live with it, the more open that is to coming in. And I love the great Leonard Cohen. I love the words on your last slide that I think just really do depict that.
This is from Leonard Cohen. It's actually a song, and I didn't know that. I used this as a poem for many, many years, but it's from a song that he wrote and that he sings, and you can get that on YouTube if you want to hear it. And I found it very, very helpful. In some ways, I'd like to think of this business of getting past a loss or grieving a loss as somewhat of a salvage mission. We save all the good that we can, and we become something more and something better in our growth. But it boils down to what this little poem says. It's from a book called Stranger Music. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. I think that's what Heidi was suggesting, that there's this wonderful potential for us to grow and to become more. Again, we don't believe it early on, but the way in which loss changes us. And I like to think of a loss experience, whether it's loss of objects or possessions or people or pets. I like to think of the loss experience as being the way in which we're wounded. The loss is the wound itself, whereas our grieving is a healing process, something to be engaged in and to embrace, because it is the way that we heal from the wounds of loss. Helps me to think of it that way.
Wow. Dr. Nadeau, thank you, Janice. It's just been great information tonight. We've had a wonderful webinar. I want to remind people again, your book is Families Making Sense of Death, and it's available through Sage Publishing. Dr. Gloria, Dr. Heidi, another great webinar tonight. For those of you out there, we just wish you a gentle Mother's Day, and we just ask you to take care of yourselves as best you can and do what works for you. But on behalf of Open to Hope and opentohope.com, the world's largest resource for grief-related materials, they're amazing. Check them out. And from thecompassionatefriends.org, we thank Janice Nadeau, Dr. Gloria Horsley, and Dr. Heidi Horsley. We thank you guys for being with us, and thanks for being on our webinar tonight.